Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to week 12 of the Slow Stitch Along project. It's a little bit different this week. As you will have noticed, I'm not talking to you, face to face. I'm already at my desk because we're going to make first, and then at the end I'm going to take you for a little walk in the woods, because this week the project will be inspired by my eco-dyed bundle books, my woodland project, which I shared a couple of weeks ago. And I'm actually pre-recording this because when this video goes up I'll be in England delivering my work, so for me I'm a couple of weeks early. And in fact we're going to kind of work on two entries at once, because we're coming up to the equinox, which in the northern hemisphere is the spring equinox, and down under is the autumn equinox. So I thought that would be a nice time to do this project, and then the second part of the project will be at the solstice. So the equinox is if you don't know, is between the two solstices, and the solstice will be in June, so that will be week 26. Anyway, all will be revealed as we go along. So what you will need is some cotton cloth. I've got old sheets. We are going to put these, or I and some of you are going to put these little things that we're going to make into nature. So please, please, please only use biodegradable materials. Please don't use anything with polyester or whatever, in case it gets lost, into the environment. I'm also going to talk as I go along about ways that you can participate if you don't have access to a natural environment, or if you don't have a garden, or or you're not able to get out and about. You'll still be able to take part, I hope. So I'll just talk you through what I've got here. I've got some cotton cloth, like I said. I'm going to make two little books, and my books are going in a book which is already getting fat. So I've got very, very thin cloth, and my books are going to have 2 pages each. Because my cloth's very thin. If you had a slightly thicker cotton, you could just take one piece like this and just fold it like that, so it's a folio, and just have that as your piece. Or you could just do one flat piece of cloth if you wanted to. You can make your decision as you go along. But I always like to stitch through 2 layers anyway, so I'm going to make 2 little books. So I've got 4 pieces. My pieces are somewhere in the region of 4 inches by 8 inches. No, they're not, because otherwise they'd fold to a square. I'll tell you exactly. They're 8 inches long by 5 inches tall. So folded into a book, they make 4 inches by 5 inches. I hope that's clear. So I've got two of those, 2 times 2. I've also got some paper and a pencil and a ruler. Not obligatory, but again, I want to show kind of the simple, easy way of doing it. If you want to just go for it and just stitch directly without any guidelines or anything, you do you, as always. I've got some threads to stitch with. Now I'm going to use this thread, which is actually naturally dyed. Normally I would have used an undyed thread of some kind. I'm going to use this because then you can see what I'm doing. If you don't have naturally dyed thread, I would recommend that you use an undyed thread, because even if the thread itself is cotton, the dyes are synthetic. So if you're putting it into nature, I'm maybe going, really extreme in that, but I just want to encourage you to be as respectful of nature as possible. The other things I've got here, I've got some scissors and a needle and, so forth. The other things I've got here, I'll just bring this in from the side, this little array of things. And all of these are optional, really. I've got a rusty thing, which is, I don't even know what it was. I think it came off a hinge or something, which I'm now handling without gloves. If you think you're sensitive to rust, please wear gloves. But it looks a bit like a question mark, and I just like that idea of a question. I've got a rather large bramble leaf, try not to prickle myself, which is about the only thing that's around at the moment. Leaves are just starting to push out on the trees, but bramble is pretty much always around. I've got a spruce cone, which I just picked up from the ground this morning. I've got some string, which has been previously used by me, but it could be new string. Again, make sure your string is hemp or jute or a natural fibre. And I've also got here, I'm not going to use it, but this is maybe an option if you don't have access to these kinds of things, a tea bag. And I just want to say about tea bags, be very, very careful. Many tea bags have plastic in the paper. So check into that if you're going to put anything with tea bags in nature. And especially these ones with the string, the label, the tab that you hold it by, this is a French supermarket, Auchan. This is plasticized. So again, you know, you think a tea bag is natural, but you just be careful. Enough of all that. So, you know, if you don't have leaves and things, you could use a tea bag, but please be careful. If you're going to put it on a windowsill or on a balcony, then you probably wouldn't have to worry about the plastic. There's not much danger of it getting lost, unless a pigeon carries it off, I suppose. But if you're putting things in nature, just be careful. I think I've made that clear enough. So I'm going to set all that to one side for a minute while we make the books. Now, I thought long and hard about what... Ooh, sorry, I've got you in really low so you can see, but then the problem is I headbutt you. I'll try not to. I thought long and hard about what to stitch onto the books. Now, this whole project is really about letting go. It's about not being precious about the piece you're creating. I'm trying to put into words what is in my heart, which is not easy. Yeah, it's about letting go of that feeling of the finished product is the most important thing. It's really about embracing the process. It's about that spirit of mandala. I've talked about that before, I think, where people make chalk drawings on the pavement, or they make designs out of little piles of sand, which is then washed away. It's all that idea. So I had many comments about my stitched texts in my bundle book, so I thought we'll stitch some text onto our books. And there's a quote that is, I really tried to find out who said it originally, and it seems that it comes from many different sources. And it's a quote I'm sure many of you will know, and I've written it on here, and you can kind of divide it into 3 parts. So the first part is, if you love something, set it free. Some of you will remember a song by Sting, of the Police. Police the band, you know, not the police force. Sorry, anyway. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it's yours. Get it the right way up, Catherine. If it doesn't, it never was. So I thought, because we're going to make 2 books, and we want something on this page, you know, for this week, the first book will have this stitched into it, and I'm going to do it in a circle. No, not that. If you love something, set it free. So I'm going to stitch that into my first little book. My second little book, I'm going to stitch the words, if it comes back, it's yours. And that is the book that I'm going to put into the woods here, and that you can put, you know, wherever. I'll talk more about that as I go along. And then if your book is lost, if you can't retrieve it, if it disappears, then on your page in June, when we go and retrieve our books, that's the idea, you can write these words, and you'll have a page with no book. You know, your book is lost, like mine is in my stream at the moment, if you've watched that video. You can just write these words on that page. If it doesn't, it never was. Okay, does that make some kind of sense, I hope? Some of you will love this, some of you will not, but you know, we'll go with it and we'll see what happens. So I have to do 2 lots of stitching, but the first thing I'm going to do before I do that is just stitch my books together. I chose in my sheets, this one's got a darn, you know, I love my darns. Tap, focus, do you see the darn? And this one had a patch sewn on it. So I'm going to have those as the sort of cover of my booklets. And then I'm going to do my stitching on the page with nothing on it. So I'm just going to line them up somewhat evenly. Doesn't really, you know, I don't mind. I'm not worried, but if you are, you do you. Vaguely lined up, fold them vaguely in half. Kind of put a crease on the fold. And I'm going to stitch them together with a thread that I prepared. Actually, I think I will just use this unbleached, you know, undyed thread to stitch my books together. Because all I'm going to do is just go through with a running stitch. If I can find a needle. This one will do, it's a bit thick, but I think threaded, yay! Sorry, I had to concentrate. And I'm just going to open up and just do a little rough line of primitive running stitch across that. Quite big stitches, about 1/2 inch. Just so that we can call it a book, using the term very loosely. But again, if you want to do just a single page, or you know, just a folio, which is a page folded double, you can do that. But like I said, my cloth was very thin. That's what I'm doing. Oops, see, I left that stitch too. Oh, there we go. It's okay. It's pulled into place. So that's book 1, and then I'll get book 2, volume 2. Volume 2 of this work in 2 volumes. And it may be, if you don't want to do the whole eco thing, you know, the putting rusty things or leaves or whatever in and doing the hiding or burying, you can maybe take this idea of letting things go free and relinquishing control. You can maybe take that and interpret it in another way. And as always, I'll be delighted to see if some of you do interpret it a little bit differently on Facebook or on Instagram, where we share. I'm just doing the same thing here. I'm just doing some, you know, big 1/2 inch, longish, doesn't matter. And then we'll get into the text. Actually, before we do that, we'll stitch the circles, I think. Oh, I didn't mention that. You need something to draw around. I've just got a little jar to draw a circle. If you want to draw a perfect circle, if you just want to freehand draw a circle, you can obviously do that as well. I'm just going to bring this little cutting mat in so I can, it's really old and warped. It's been left in the sun at one point, you know, just so I can draw, and then I'll get it away again. So you've maybe seen me before pin on a paper template and stitch around it, but because this is going to get grunged, I'm not bothered about pencil. I just use normal pencil. This is just quite a soft pencil. It's a 4B. So there's my first circle. Make sure I've got my cover where I want it with my little darn and my little patch. There we go, that's a very wobbly circle, but no matter. Actually, one of them is going to be untreated, so the pencil will stay, but you know, doesn't matter. So now I've drafted my alphabet, and this is the same alphabet that I used in my other project, in my bundle books. I drew, you know, I just wrote an entire alphabet on paper, A to Z. I believe my friends over the pond say Z, but we say Z. And I wanted to do 1 stitch per line. And I wanted the text to kind of look, I don't know how to say it, sort of oldie-worldy. So I wrote my alphabet, you know, and looked at each letter and broke it down into how can I make it. And if it's a letter like an F, it's obviously just 3 straight lines. An R, I did the vertical line, and then for the roundy part of the R, I did a triangle. Hope you can see that. Maybe if I hold it closer. I think it stays focused. Can you see the R in the word free? And then the O, I basically stitched a rectangle, and the U, I stitched a, you know, a rectangle without its top, and so on. So feel free to use my alphabet, or feel free to, you know, do it your own way. Now, I didn't write the words on the cloth. I just drew these guidelines. Do you see how I've written between the guidelines? I just drew the guidelines and then stitched the text freehand. But if you want to write your words on the cloth and then stitch over them, you do that, okay? So I need 3 and I kind of did it on paper first just to space out where my words are, because that kind of thing is important to me. If it's not, again, if your words are all over the place and that's what you're happy with, you do you. So I need to have 3 lines. Or I need 6 lines actually, but I need them, you know, three places to. And I'm just going to do it by eye. And just draw myself some lines to fit in my circle, which about 1/4 inch apart should do it. Then I'm going to leave a little space and do another line, another pair of lines for the word something, and then a little space, and then another pair of lines for the words set it free. And I think while I'm drawing I'm going to do the other one as well, so that then I can get the mat away. So I'm just going to do the same thing again by eye. I say by eye, I can't really see because I'd have to stick my head under the light and then you wouldn't be able to see. So just the same thing again, a pair of lines, leave a space. My space is maybe 1/8 inch, a couple of millimeters. Another pair of lines, and then a space and another pair of lines. That's it. So now that I'm done with drawing, I can put all that away. Sorry about the clattering, I can get rid of that. And then, do I want this book to stay here with its patch and put the book with the darn in the woods? Or do I want to keep the book with the darn here and put this in the woods? I think I'll put the darn in the woods, so I'll start with this one. Made that decision quickly. It's very helpful for me doing these videos because it's making me make decisions more quickly than I maybe usually would, which is kind of more intuitive. So I've got, this is very fine thread. I think I've got 3 strands in there. And I'm going to just keep this here in case I forget what I'm supposed to be writing. So I see how I've spaced it, that I need to start my if here. I kind of just visualise on the piece. So, or, you know, with my needle go if, space, you, space, love, something, you know, how you're going to space it out. Not worrying about knots. I could trap them between the layers if I wanted to, but I'm not gonna. So I'm going to start with the word if. I found it handier stitching sort of that way rather than trying to do it the right way up. But obviously you'll turn as you go along. And I'm not worrying about what's going on the back. I'm just thinking, what's the best direction to go in? I need to come out here to do the base of my eye. And come up there. And the lines are just there to guide you. If you come off the lines, you know, doesn't matter. So there's going to be my I, so I'm going to leave a space and move along to do my F. I'm going to come right back up to the top and do the top of the F next, I think. And sometimes you have to chicken stitch, which is stab stitch. If you don't know why I'm calling it chicken stitch, it's because a lady in the comments said her granny called it peck and scratch. So there's if, and now I need to go and leave a slightly bigger space because I'm starting a new word, which is you. And I did my Y by doing a diagonal line and coming sort of halfway between my guidelines, like that, and then lay the thread on so that it crosses that point, like that, and then finish the tail of the Y. And I even then sort of judged as I was going along, am I making the letters too big? Am I going to run out of space? And then you just make the letters a bit smaller, you know? It doesn't matter. It's about the process. So I'm sorry I can't talk about last week's challenge, last week's prompt, because it hasn't happened yet. Usually I talk about, you know, how people interpreted last week. So when I get back from England and get back into my regular rhythm, I'll catch up on that. So a tiny space for my U. And I can already see that my word love is going to have to be a bit squashed up because I've gone a bit big. And my thread's looping, but I'm not bothering. I don't need to do that, do I? Because I've come up the wrong place. Does it, in fact, take more concentration than the usual stuff. So I now need to squeeze the word love into my space that's left. You do start doubting yourself whether you're spelling quite simple words correctly when it's because it's slower than writing, I think. L-O-V-E, love. L. I'm going to have to do it really squashed up. So really tall, skinny O. Oh, I've pulled it too tightly. I'll just pull the cloth out so that it sits back down. What am I doing? An O. And I don't go in any particular direction with the letter, I just go where it seems. And see there, I'm going to go diagonally to there. And I actually do like what you then will see on the back. I'm going to come down for the point of my V. I'm really squeezing this in, which is kind of poetic in a way, that love has to be squeezed in sometimes. I've hardly got room for the E. See, I started off way too big and spaced out over here. My E is literally right on the edge of my circle. I'm going to come somewhere. I'm going to come actually behind the vertical for my middle part of my E. I don't know why, I just thought that was what I should do. I'm going to go through to the back and have a look and see if I'm happy enough with it. Yeah, I think it's fine. It's obvious that I've spaced it wrong, but I don't mind. I don't mind. So now I have two options. Either I can write the word something back to front, start with the G and work my way back because my thread's here, or I can break my thread and start again. What I was doing was working backwards, but then I was concentrating and not talking to you lovely people at the same time. So I'm wondering if I dare do that. Shall I just go for it and see what happens? So I'm going to come down here for my G, and I'm just going to sort of poke around. And I'm looking there on my little drawing that I did. Can you even see that my G was somewhere under the V when I spaced it out correctly, but I didn't space it out correctly here, so I'm just going to go roughly in the right place and hope I do better. And I'm just letting my thread trail on the back. I'll show you the back before I start. Do you see? I love that. That's almost like a non-language, a language without words. It's like little runes. So my G is basically, you start by making a C. Oops, if you can get hold of your needle. I'll just come back where I went in, more or less. And then from this point of the C, I need to do my little T shape. That's gone completely wonky, but I'm going to go this way round. If you want it to be neater, and I'm sure I could do it neater, I could make all kinds of excuses as to why it's not neater. My G is completely, actually I'm going to take that out. There's nothing wrong with taking things out if it makes you unhappy to leave it in. And there's nothing wrong with leaving things wonky if that makes you happy. I'm going to pull it out from the back. I do believe this may be the first time you've ever seen me pull something out. It doesn't happen very often. Now I have to rethread. So I hope you get the idea of stitching the letters. So I will go on stitching the letters, and at the same time I will talk to you about things you could do with your little book. If you want to take part in the, the process of putting it somewhere and letting elements work on it. If you have access to a garden, then it's obvious what you can do. You can put it in your garden. And I would think about, it's going to be left there for about 3 months or so. I would think about the climate that you're in a little bit, and this is taking control to, maybe to a degree. But if you're somewhere very dry, I would put it somewhere damp, so maybe in the ground or under a bush or, something like that, so that it's exposed to as much change as your environment can offer it. If you live somewhere very damp and humid and warm, then maybe you want to put it somewhere slightly drier, otherwise it might disappear entirely in the 3 months. If you just want to, which is what I do, intuitively go out into your environment, whether it's your garden or, whatever, and I'm just trying to make sure I spell something correctly backwards. You can just go out and just see what space speaks to you. Now I went out this morning with the dogs and got my bramble leaf and my spruce cone and so on. And as I was walking around, I had a little contemplate about where I'm going to go out in a bit and put mine. And a place just kind of spoke to me and said, put it here. So you could do that. Now, when I lived in England, I did not have all this woodland on my doorstep. I had a small garden. I had lived in a townhouse with a small walled garden that was mostly just grass and a couple of apple trees. And I used to do this. I've been doing this for years, things like this. And I would walk the dogs across a local recreation area, a park, where people played football and there were swings and all that kind of stuff. And from there up into a slightly more wild area, but it was still public park. But it was where only the dog walkers really went. And I would leave bundles there in places. And I would tuck them into, little places in tree trunks, or put them under fallen leaves at the base of a tree, or hide them under a rock and things like that. And I never lost one. No one ever took one, because they're natural. They look natural, especially when they're all bundled up with string. They're camouflaged. I've even, when I used to teach at a stately home in England called Barrington Court, I used to teach there regularly because a friend of mine had a fabric shop, and she ran workshops, and I was sometimes a tutor. And there were these stone lions on pillars at the gate. Sorry, I just have to look every now and then that I'm spelling it correctly. And I tucked things sometimes behind the stone lion and left it a few weeks until I went back to teach again and then retrieved it. And even there, where especially in summer there were hundreds of visitors wandering around, because it was a tiny little thing that was tucked in, nobody ever took it. So don't worry about that if you are worrying about that. Leaving in public places. Again, I'm going to say it again, make sure it's biodegradable, otherwise you're just littering. It's not art, it's litter, I think. So you could do that even if you live in the heart of town and there's, maybe, I don't know, trees planted at the side of the road with somewhere you could leave something. Just have a quick scout over your shoulder, make sure no one's watching, and just tuck it in. And then I would take a picture with my phone, or make a little note in a book where I put it and when I'd put it, and just leave it there. So you could do that. If you don't feel that is even an option to you, you could put it on your windowsill if you live in a you know, in an apartment or a block of flats, as we call it in England, and put something on it so it doesn't blow away, or ideally tie it to something like the window catch or something like that. And now, because I've now got a vision of someone putting a stone on it and then the stone falling down and hitting someone on the head, we don't want to do that either, you know. If even that's not an option to you, sometimes buildings, you know, with apartments high up, you can't open the windows wide enough. You could just leave it somewhere in your home. You know, if you really can't think of a solution of putting it outside somewhere, you could just leave it somewhere in your home, and then obviously elements won't work on it, but then you could maybe leave it with a tea bag or something like that and put it in a little tray, or a little bowl, you know, a porcelain bowl or something, and then sort of hide it from yourself somewhere, I don't know, in a dark corner of your home, and see what happens. But I think most people should have access to some sort of outside space. But those were the ideas that I came up with. I'm sure you can come up with other ideas. See, I've now done this too big as well. At the M, I need to fit the O and the S. I think I'm good. I did it, the first project that I did in this way. Well, I lived quite near the sea in England, and I used to put bundles on the beach. That's another thing you could do if you're lucky enough to live near a beach. And I would go down below the tide line, at low tide obviously, and put a bundle, again, only natural materials. I've said that enough, haven't I? Often beach finds in among, you know, driftwood or seashells or bits of seaweed, things like that. And bury it in the sand under a rock below the tide line, and then go back however many days or sometimes weeks later and then try and retrieve it. Often I lost them, you know, because it's the sea. I'm just seeing if I can squeeze my S out of this tiny bit of thread that's left. Otherwise I'll have to start again with a new bit. I did one piece when I was on holiday in Pembrokeshire with Hans, my husband. We had a 10-day break. We rented a little cottage in Pembrokeshire, which is a beautiful part of the world. And we put it on the first day under a rock on a beach called Broadhaven. It is near a little tiny village called Bosheston, where there are lily ponds. And it was February, so there wasn't a lot around. I think I put some bramble leaves that were growing on the little path down to the beach and things like that. Now I need to finish my thread. And so we left it there for the 10 days that we were there, and then we went and got it. I say we, Hans, because we went slightly too late and the tide was coming back in, and so he went in his very tall man's welly boots, you know, and he managed to get it back for me. And I've still got that cloth. I didn't really finish that off properly, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to trim it slightly and let it be. So that's how I started really doing it on the beach. And that was maybe, well, the children were very small. It must have been 15 years ago or more. And then when my daughter was about 12 or so, no, younger, maybe 10, she learnt at school about a project called EcoCache. I think there's an app. I think it's possibly a global thing. I'm not completely sure. But people leave little boxes in hiding places, and then in the box are little objects like buttons or, you know, all kinds of stuff, or little notes. And it's a little bit like a message in a bottle type thing, only on land. Now, I think it's a nice idea, but again, I've seen, you know, we've been and checked on some of them, and there's plastic, but, you know, I'm going to stop going on about plastic. I think you know by now my feelings on the subject. But anyway, she would love to go and look for them, and, you know, we looked online, I think, to see where the places were near us, and there were a couple. And she'd like to go and look and see in the little box, and the idea is you take something out and you put something in. So we would usually take out something, a button or something like that, and then put in a little shell from the beach or a pebble or something, and then a little note to other people that might come along. And from that I had the idea myself of doing something that I then called cloth cash. And I did a hashtag on Instagram, and I think it still must be there. I haven't looked for a while, I should look. And I would make little bundles like this and leave them in places. I didn't put on the internet where they were or anything. I would, on a lolly stick, write my Instagram account, at k3n.clothdales, and leave them. And sometimes I would, if I went back to that place, I would then retrieve them myself. Sorry, I'm just making sure I get my S the right way around. Yeah, that's right. But twice, once I left one, we were camping somewhere down in Devon, and I left one on a hill. I can't remember what it's called. Begins with a D. Anyway, it's a conical hill, and on the top were a little stand of trees, and I left one there. And a lady found it, and she private messaged me on Instagram to say she'd found it, and we had a little exchange back and forth, and she really appreciated it, and I just thought it was wonderful. And then another one was in my local area, and someone I actually knew found it with her daughters. And they had great fun, and she sent me pictures of the cloth, and the daughters made little dresses for their dollies out of it, out of the cloth, after she'd given it a good wash, obviously. So that was nice. So that was really how I started doing this. And then it's just evolved. Now I'm lucky enough to have these woods on my doorstep into a way of working with nature. I'm trying not to do the same thing that I did up there, and make sure I leave plenty of room to fit in. The words set it free. And there are various people doing similar things, I think, There are many different ways of interpreting this idea. I just work with, what you do yourself just evolves into certain directions as you go along. One idea sparks off another. Set. Oopsie. Fred's come in, but he's going to sleep over there, I hope, and not come and start. Well, no, I don't hope. If he comes in, jumps up on the desk, then many of you like that. I think some of you are disappointed if it doesn't happen. I think it's only happened once. And what letter am I doing now? When you turn it upside down, you get completely lost, or I do. I need a letter T. Set it. When I was trying to find out who said this, and failing because it was said by many people, or, it's one of those things that it's been attributed to various people. But I couldn't find any sort of hard and fast evidence, or variations on it, not the exact same words, but the sentiment. But one of the people it was attributed to, as it turns out, falsely, I think, was Richard Bach, who wrote a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, I think in the 70s. But I know it was very popular when I was at college. And Jonathan Livingston Seagull was kind of a maverick, a loner, who was sort of ousted from his community. I think I haven't read it in years, but Richard Bach's name popped up, and I thought, Richard Bach actually is or was a pilot, so he had a thing with flying. But if you don't know Jonathan Livingston Seagull, in fact, I don't think I have a copy anymore, but I do feel inclined to look for a copy online and read it again. There's my R. And your text doesn't have to be perfect. You see, mine is far from, because we see text. I don't know if you've ever seen those things that are written and the letters are wrong. You know the things I mean. And they say things like, if you can read this, you are a genius, things like that. But nearly everybody can read them, so it's not really true. The letters are, there's just some of the letters are there and others are different letters, but the brain fills in the gaps. So don't worry about your wonky letters. The point of it is not to stitch perfect letters. And I would recommend you, when you're doing this, to sit and think about, you know, the concepts that we're working with, the idea of letting go of things. I am whittering on to you, so I'm not really doing that now, but when I stitched certainly when I stitched that long scroll, which was many, many hours of stitching words, with all those botanical names. I'll put a link to that video, hopefully I'll remember, if I don't shout at me, or if I don't, there's a playlist called Making the Forager's Journal, or just the Forager's Journal, and that video will be in that playlist, because that's the name of the piece of, that's going into my exhibition, and those videos will be coming up every Friday showing how I make that journal. But anyway, go and have a look at that, and maybe you'll be inspired to do different formats to this if you don't like the idea of this. So anyway, that clearly says, if you love something, set it free. I'm going to just now quickly, well, you know, not quickly, but I'm just going to stitch around the edge of my circle, just with the running stitch. And I'm going to have to come out a bit there, otherwise I'm going to interfere with my letter E, where I didn't fit my word love in very well. Doesn't matter. The other thing you could do, I haven't done it, is, but you could stitch, if you had 2 layers, you could stitch all around the edges of your pages as well in some way. You know, if you wanted to do more stitching on it, you could get a knot in your thread. No, it really doesn't want to come through. There we go. You could do some seed stitching in the background. You could do some seed stitching here, and this one's going to stay in the book, so you could go to town on this one if you wanted to. If you want to put them both in your book, you could, you know, not put them out, or you could do that. That's absolutely, you don't have to do the putting it out somewhere thing if you don't want to. In that case, I would then say, because in June when we go and retrieve them, those of us who have put them out, we will then have various options depending on what state they're in, and whether we find them or not, what we're going to do in that week. But that week's not here yet, so I haven't really thought further than that. But if you really don't want to put them out somewhere, you could make your second booklet but not stitch it yet, and just tuck it in somewhere in your journal, you know, somewhere safe, ready for when that day in June comes, when those of us that have put them out go retrieving them, and then you could stitch on it that week. So don't feel that you have to do the putting out thing if you don't want to. Just then try and embrace the idea of letting go, you know, setting free expectations on the finished piece. So you could kind of do it in a metaphorical way rather than a literal way, if that makes sense. Right, Fred's decided to go to sleep on the pile of... I made some eco-printed aprons out of old sheets to sell at the exhibition. And they're still laying there. By the time you watch this, they will have been finished, because I have to take them to... they'll be in England with me. But at this point I still haven't put the pockets on them. It's one of those little jobs that I'm probably going to end up doing the night before I go. I would much prefer this actually if it was white on white and not the red, and the red a bit stark against the white. But the one I put out hopefully will tone down a bit. Whoops. you know, in the ethos of setting things free, I'm not going to stress about the fact that I'm not very happy with the red on white. I'm just going to let it be. Right, I'm going to just do a tiny back stitch on the back just to anchor my end, but I'm not going to be too neat about it. I actually prefer the back. Okay, so that's my book one, my volume one. And I shall put that into my journal at the end, well not at the end, but at the end of sitting on my desk, the end. Shall I leave that there so you can, if you want to look closer at how not to space your letters. So now I've got this one. Now this one I am going to put out, I think, if you don't mind. And if you do mind, I'm sorry, there'll be nothing that can be done about it. I'm going to use the cream, the undyed, because I think you've seen me stitch the letters enough to get the idea. I hope you don't mind if I do that. If you do mind, I'm sorry I did that. When I stitch them, I'll hold it up and make sure it's in focus so you can see. But I really hope that you've got the idea of stitching the letters from watching me do that one. It's not rocket science. And if you really don't want yours to be as super wonky as mine are, you can, as I said, write them on and then just stitch over the pencil line. In fact, shall I do that? Shall I do that, because then you will at least be able to see the words even if you can't see the thread. I'm going to do that quickly. Which means I need this again. And I need to find my pencil, which it's on top. Good, right. I haven't done it this way before, so it's new for me. If it, actually there's more space here because the words are shorter. Comes the B. I hope I'm in frame. I do the straight line and then I do 2 triangles like that, because I found if I did them square it just looked like a number 8. But you know, experiment on a piece of paper with a pencil and see what you can come up with. Now we need an apostrophe police. It short for it is, so it needs an apostrophe. I'm sorry, it's one of my things. I do it. I used to work in public relations. I think I talked about it when we did the English paper piecing week, because I used to work for the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and one of the parts of my jobs was to write and proofread, I nearly said, proofread press releases. And now I can't stop my brain from doing it when I see things, you know, written. And one of the things is apostrophes. Right, yours. Okay, so I can get that away. And now I don't need my bit of paper there. My bit of silk. And now I don't have to worry about spelling things wrong or spacing things wrong. I'm just going to stitch over where I drew. The other thing I do, and I don't even know why, confession time, well it's not, you know, it's not a major confession, is, you know, the Union flag, the flag of the United Kingdom. It has a way up and a way round, because the cross that goes like this, and there's white space either side of it, and the space is wider on one side than the other. I mean, you know, I don't really want to be psychoanalyzed as to why I do it, but when I see them hanging, or you know, on documents or on the television or wherever you happen to see a Union flag, Jack, I check that they're the right way around, and I don't do it consciously. I just see it I just see it if it's wrong. And I'm ever so slightly irritated by it. Yeah, please don't, if you're one of, if you're someone who's trained in psychoanalysis, I just don't really want to know. So, those sort of national celebrations like the coronation of the king and things like that are a bit of a nightmare for me. Still strange to think that there's a king. So obviously my whole life it's been, and many people's whole lives, it's been Queen Elizabeth. I have actually met Charles while I managed to get myself onto the subject. Well, met him, bumped into him quite literally. Because I don't know if I've told this story before here. Anyway, I'll tell it again. I used to live in a little town called Tetbury in the Cotswolds in England, and it's not far away from, it's public knowledge, so I'm not, saying anything I shouldn't. It's not far away from Highgrove House, which is King Charles, we now have to call him, one of his country homes. And at Christmas in Tetbury, he would come and turn on the Christmas lights. He was our local celebrity, we were very lucky. Well, I think he's a decent bloke as far as I can make out. If I'm allowed to say decent bloke about the king. But anyway, one day we were at the celebrations for turning on the Christmas lights, and all the shops would, be open, and they'd have drink and food, and there'd be musicians and, street theatre and all kinds of stuff going on. It was a lovely party. Often it was Victorian themed, because British Christmas, or certainly English Christmas, is largely thanks to Queen Victoria. So me and my two friends who I was there with were in the town square, and then another friend came up and said, we were quite young, I think I was maybe in my late 20s, in my defence. She came up and said that a certain shop down the road was giving free mulled wine and mince pies free. But the mulled wine thing was an attraction. So we all four went charging down the pavement to this shop before they ran out of mulled wine. But it was an absolute crush of people. And apparently we weren't the only ones that wanted the mulled wine. So we were sort of in a crowd then, shuffling along, and not pushing, but being pushed from behind. You know how it is if you're in a big crowd of people and you're trying to move along. And the person behind me sort of shoved me quite hard, and at the same time, not intentionally, I'm sure, and then the person in front of me kind of stopped dead in their tracks. So I crashed into the back of this gentleman that was wearing this beautiful wool coat that was sort of camel-coloured. And I went, "Oh, sorry," just like that, as you do when you accidentally bump into somebody. And this gentleman turned around, and my face went bright pink, and I said, "Sir," because it was the then Prince Charles, who was apparently also in pursuit of mulled wine and mince pies. So that's my Prince Charles story. But, many people locally bumped into him here and there. A friend of mine lived in another little village where she walked on farmland, which was a farmer's who she knew and had permission to walk there with her dog. One day she strayed onto other land, and there was a chap there in the green waxed coat, with the flat tweed cap and a little Yorkshire Terrier at his heels, leaning on his walking stick, and she stopped and had a chat with him. How did I get on to King Charles, who was the then Prince Charles, while talking about eco-dyed bundle books? Anyway, so she was having a chat with this chap just about this and that. She was a very personable young woman, very lovely, got on with everybody, very open, hippy-dippy type friend of mine. I had a few of those. So she was chatting away quite openly with this bloke. And as she was leaving, he said, oh, by the way, young woman, I don't know if he said young woman, I'm probably embellishing, just so you know, you are on Highgrove land. And at that point she realised that it was indeed the then Prince Charles. Yeah. I don't know. How did I start even talking about that? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how my brain leads me down these paths. But anyway, it does. And in fact, that town, maybe that's why subconsciously, because the exhibition is in Nailsworth, which is a town about a 10-minute drive from Tetbury, where I used to live. That's probably why it's making me think about when I used to live there. Another friend of mine who, along with her husband, were farmers, had land which was adjacent to Highgrove land, Prince Charles's land. And my friend's husband, had to go every now and then to have meetings with Charles about, I don't know, communal fences or whatever it is that farmers talk about with each other, things like that. And he always had to make an appointment. Obviously, you don't just knock on that person's door. But up to the point where he had to say what vehicle he was coming in with, the registration number. And when you drive past the gates to Highgrove, when you live in Tetbury, as you drive to Nailsworth, you pass the gates to Highgrove, and they're often standing open, and it's leafy, and you can't see the house from the road. It's hidden from view. But it just looks like you could just drive in there. There's no guards on the gates, although certainly weren't in those days. So anyway, my friend's husband went off for his appointment, and he'd made the appointment, obviously, and he'd said the registration number of his car and so on. But when he went out into the yard to get into his car, his wife's car was blocking him in. So rather than go and move it, he just took her car, because it was, in the way. So he drives in through these gates to Highgrove, and several Secret Service gentlemen who emerged from the shrubbery and asked him his business, because it was the wrong registration number. Yeah, it was fine, he explained, and I hope I'm allowed to tell that story. I just did. I don't know why I wouldn't be, but actually, saying I've never done this before, writing on cloth and stitching over, I am liking doing it like this. It's a different process to the other way. Maybe I would say do both in your two books, if you like. On one, write it on and stitch over, and on the other, do it freehand. Maybe that would be a good exercise. And be aware whilst you're stitching, how each way makes you feel, Which way does it make you feel more comfortable to stitch over drawn letters? Or do you find it more liberating to just stitch freehand? And what I mean by that is the process of doing it, not how it looks. Try and well, obviously how it looks will change how you feel about it. You can't get away from that. But yeah, just try and think about all those things. I'm sorry my thumb is in the way. I just can't avoid it when I'm stitching. It's just a habit to push the stitch with my thumb as I go. Because, yeah, this is an entirely different process to stitching freehand, even whilst I've been talking and not fully concentrating on what I'm doing. And I also notice here that I'm stab stitching or chicken stitching, rather than, going in and out. So that's interesting, to me at least, and maybe some of you, I hope. But in principle, doing the same thing. In principle, the end result is very similar. I've got stitched letters on a bit of cloth. but the practice of doing it is very different. And there, that's right, it's just a bit of random fluff. And I'm just leaving the pencil lines there afterwards. I'm not going to get rid of them. If that bothers you, you could use one of those, there's a kind of thing called a friction pen, I believe. I've never had one or used one, that you iron, and then, probably because it involves ironing, you iron and then it goes away. And there's also what I do have as well, those blue pens they're left over from my quilting days. You know, when I was a normal quilter, when I made quilts. And I've got a couple that still work-ish, so I'm still using them. But they're those blue pens, and then you put water on and the blue goes away. Or it disappears. I don't think it goes away. I think it's still there in the cloth. But I just find that the pencil, I've done it dark so you can see. You can do it much fainter than that, just so you know, so that you can see. You don't have to do it so that everybody else can see. And I find then if you do it faint, even moving your hands over it while you're stitching rubs it off. But certainly this little bundle that's going to go into the woods in a little while, the pencil, pencil is graphite, which is carbon, so I'm not worried about that. Because carbon is, you know, the building blocks of living things. It's not lead. People talk about pencil leads, but it's not lead. I've been told off gently by ladies in workshops when I've licked the tip of my pencil. Made my R really tiny. Never mind. To make it right, you know, sometimes if you've got a slightly harder pencil, if you lick the tip of it to write on cloth, I had one or two ladies telling me I'd get lead poisoning, which of course I won't because it's graphite, which is carbon. Science. I love science. There are a few comments on the Eco Bundle book. Did I call it that? Yes. Eco Dyed Bundle Books video from people appreciating that I talked about science, you know, whilst talking about that. And that for me is something that I do enjoy, science. Because science to me is not men in white lab coats and, you know, although it is that as well, obviously, but science to me is the natural world. It's everything. Everything is chemicals, is another favourite expression of mine, which is also true. Another hobby horse when people say, all natural, no chemicals. Not possible, everything's chemicals. They mean, of course, synthetic chemicals. But then the pedant in me says, well, then you should say that. I used to have it with organic vegetables, but I've got used to that now, you know. I'd say, well, where's the inorganic vegetables then? They mean organically grown without pesticides and so on. But organic is something which is, you know, natural, organic, which all vegetables are regardless of, you know. Anyway, stop, Catherine, stop. Right. So I shall finish off on the back. Oh no, I won't. First of all, I'll stitch around the circle. I think I've got just enough of this thread to do that. And then I'll hold it up and show you. And then I'll make my little bundle. And we'll go into the woods, to the woods, to the woods. And if you know the Mary Oliver poem, How I Go to the Woods, if you don't, do look it up. I'll paraphrase. It's basically about liking to go to the woods alone because your friends all chatter and talk and you like to just be there with nature and be able to sit quietly and see the fox going by and hear the birds sing and so on. That's basically what the poem's about. And at the end she says, so if you have ever been to the woods with me, I must love you very much. And I'm going to take you all into the woods with me. So you may draw your own conclusions. just about going to get away with this, I think. Oh, and of course the other thing I have to do before we go into the woods is stitch my first little booklet into the journal. And I won't be writing words on the page because the words are already on the cloth. One more stitch through to the back and we'll call it done. Cut a bit off. The other thing is be careful with thread. I mean, even natural thread with birds. I hear of people saying they put thread nests out for birds. Even if it's cotton, it makes me anxious that birds might get tangled in it. Anyway, sorry, that was going off on another tangent. I just thought of it. Okay, so that little book's going to get bundled in a minute. Oh, I said I'd show you and I didn't. Can you see it? Is it focused? Hang on, I have to stand up. If I held it still, that would probably help. There we go. If it comes back, it's yours. Oh, and then I knock you. I'm sorry, I'm so clumsy sometimes. Yep, seen enough of that. So that's the one that's going to get bundled with its little darned front. And the other one's going into the journal, which I have to... Oh no, you'll have seen it already. Because I haven't yet shown last week, I'm thinking I shouldn't show it, but by the time you see this, you'll have seen last week. So there's my Kawandi. Oh, it's gone all blurry. What's happened? There we go. There's my Kawandi, which you all know about because that was last week. So turn the page. Oh, I've got a suitably grungy page here. That's nice. So I don't obviously want to stitch it closed. I think I'm going to stitch it here. Just through the back page, and then it'll be easy as well along the edge. I'll just use this because there's enough of it. I'm going to turn it. Don't think I need the giant paper clip. I think I can manage. Oops, that's attached still. I'm just going to line it, you know, line it up by right. Make sure. There was one lady in the Feathers Week who did sew 2 pages together, but she said, no matter, I shall just find a feather and tuck it in the pocket. I thought that was wonderful. That was embracing the, well, I don't like to say mistake, embracing doing the thing that you didn't intend to do. And I find with many papers, if you just bend them gently, you can just stitch normally. Especially when I'm on the edge of a page like this, where it's, you know, I'm not near the spine. I'm being bothered by that. And I can say as well, I'm just making sure in my head that I've got my days right, that, yes, last Wednesday, if you watched Wonky Wednesday, you would have seen me playing in my journal with a little log cabin made of paper and cloth. And this coming Wednesday, Wonky Wednesday, I will be looking at Manx quilting, which is related to log cabins and maybe even inspired log cabins because it dates from the 19th century, from the Isle of Man, which is off the coast of the northwest of England, not very far away from where I was born, the town of Blackpool. So that's coming up this Wednesday. I'm going to leave that dangling because it's only a little short bit. So all I need to do now is find my pencil, which again is not in the pocket. I'll just use this one. Now we are because I'm not this date, I'm way earlier, the 18th of March. Yeah, so the solstice is, the equinox I think is the 21st. Don't quote me. It might even vary from hemisphere to hemisphere, but it's this week. So the 18th of the 3rd, 24. K3N. And if you want to go ahead in your journal and look for where week 26 will fall and, you know, mark it in some way, but I'm just going to wait till I get there. So there's my week 12. I've also started on the thumbnail of the videos putting what the subject matter was. Someone suggested it so that it's not always clear by the picture. So if you want to look back through the playlist at any point for English paper piecing or whatever, well, that one didn't have it on, but Kawandi I think was the first time I did it. If you want to look back for Kawandi, you can see it says Kawandi. So I hope that doesn't confuse you. So this one will say Eco-Dyed Bundle Books or something. If you love something, set it free. So there we go. So I'm going to pause you and I'm going to go and, oh no, before I do that, I'm not going to pause you. I'm going to bundle my bundle, the fun part. Well, it's all fun. So I'm not going to use the tea bag, that was just to show you. I'm not sure if I'm going to use all this. If you didn't have a spruce cone, you could get a stick. Remember what I said about the rusty thing and the bare hands, but I know I'm fine, so I think I'm going to be very, no I'm not, I'm just going to be very naughty and cut the bramble with my scissors. I think I'm just going to take one of these leaves because they're quite big, and I'm drawn to the damaged one, so I'm going to have that one. Put the rest back in the woods. I'm going to put it, just lay it there, and it's obviously spiny, so that might have something to say with, that might have a conversation with the cloth and do something to it. There's no right or wrong way to do this. We're not doing proper eco dyeing where you have to get good contact and, you know, all that stuff. I'm just making it pleasing to me. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to tie it onto it. I might do it so the question mark kind of frames the darn in some way. To get my grungy string. I'm going to start in the middle. I hope it's not going out of focus. Just holding the tail with my thumb and, you know, pulling it over it so it stays. And I'm just going to bundle it round like that. Any old who. I don't mind if it goes, it's not an even thing, so it's going to go all over the place. It's maybe an idea as well, something, and I will obviously have a record of it because it'll be in the video, to take a photo of your piece before you bundle it. And that's maybe when we come to June then, those of you who are sharing on Instagram or Facebook, you'll be able to do a before and after photo. I think I'm just going to keep going and bundle this whole thing, you know, use this whole bit of string up. I hope it's not going blurry. I'm trying to keep my movements. Look at my hand now. This is, yeah, well, stop going on about your hands. Nobody cares, apparently. Well, one person did care very early on in my YouTube career and said something very mean about my hands. And I think that's why I'm always apologising for them, but I'm going to stop. It's funny how one person saying something mean affects you more than, I don't know how many other people saying lovely things. It's, yeah, we really must let go of that. Okay, so there's my bundle. So now I'm going to, I'm not going to wash my hands because I'm probably going to go digging. I'm going to pause you and I'm going to go downstairs, and the next time, in a few seconds for you, we'll be going into the woods. So here we are in the woods. I've just stepped in. There's the horse field. There's the horses. Bit of a grey day, but it's not raining at the moment. So now I'm going to try and not wobble. And that was Sarah's having a wee. Sorry about that. Dogs do what dogs do. I'm going to try and not wobble, and I hope you can hear me. I've got the microphone connected and I've got it stuck in my hair twist. Styles, don't let me trip over you because I forgot to put the clip on it. So anyway, I'm going to just walk down here. This is Walnut Grove. That's my big walnut tree there. A big tree in the middle there. I've got my bundle in my little bag over my shoulder. I hear a woodpecker. I'm going to come down through here because I want to go past the wolf stump, which I showed you a photograph of in the bundle book video. I'm trying to see what you can see and also keep an eye on the ground so I don't trip. And here's the wolf stump. You can just see it. Do you see it there? So we're going to go through that way. This way, Sirius. Sirius wants to go the other way because that's a longer walk, but we're not going that way. We're going this way. You see how he struggles with his back legs sometimes, poor old boy. So I did think about putting it in the wolf stump again, but I thought, well, I've done that already. You see, it's quite clearly a wolf. So I'm going to go a little bit further on. Out onto this little path. The dogs are going the right way. Down towards the phoenix oak. See, the woods are still quite wintry, but there's signs of life. Just beginning. These are mostly hazels here, hazel trees. The odd chestnut. This area of the woods was cleared before we lived here, about 15 years ago, and so it's very young. And just about where Sirius is the phoenix oak and Stella, but Sirius is easier to see because he's black and white and a bit bigger. So here is a little, you have to weave your way through. These are hawthorn. Stells, probably a little animal living in there. Don't annoy them. It's their home. We're only visiting. And the place that I thought of, just go over here so I can show you. This is the phoenix oak. So you see the vertical trunk laying or covered in moss, and that lump on the left hand side there with the dark green moss, that's the original stump where it fell. But then Stella, sorry, growing up out of it are all these other new trunks of oak trees. And there's a little place just in here, and that's where I'm going to put my bundle. Now I'm obviously going to have to do it one-handed, so I'm going to reach around in my bag. I'll try and show you what I'm doing. I think it'll go blurry because it's too close. I've got it here in my bag. That's my microphone lead. My bramble, the rest of my bramble leaves, I'll just, put them back where they came from, more or less. I didn't bring anything to dig with, so I shall use a stick, not that one because it's rotten. Use this mossy stick, and I'm just going to, oh, there's a stone in there. I'm going to get that stone out. If I'd brought a stick to dig with, I would have put it a bit deeper. But I didn't. Not a stick, a trowel. Stells! Stella! Stella! Stop! I don't know what's there, but she's very interested in it. Sorry, I'm wobbling while I'm digging. That's unavoidable. I don't have a tripod or anything fancy like that. I just have to hold it with my one hand and dig with the other. So here's my little bundle. Just tuck it in there. And cover it back over. Oh, sorry, I knocked you. There we go. And I think since that lovely flat stone was laying there, I should put that on top to mark it. And so can you imagine that if you did that somewhere public, nobody's going to go looking there, unless you want them to.
Actually, I said when I talked about my cloth cache project, I said I didn't put on the internet. I meant to say I did. I did on Instagram say I've put a bundle here, and that's how people found them, because that was the intention. So sorry about that. There we go. So I'm just going to leave that like that. I think I'm going to lay that stick there as well, since it was involved in the process. And wipe my hand on my leggings. Sorry, I'm quite primitive. Take my paper biodegradable bag away with me. Oh, sorry, creaky knees. And stop rustling the paper, Catherine. People don't want to hear that. So there we go. That's my bundle in situ, and there it shall sit until I think it'll be the 24th of June. Will be the Monday near the solstice. So I hope you like that, something different. And thank you very much, as always, for watching. And I look forward to you joining me next time. I'll let Sirius be the outro picture for more cloth tales. Bye bye.